All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And here he is on October 11th, Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus and welcome everyone. Happy to have you join us as we look to the return of Christ and the way that world events, global events are unfolding in accordance with Scripture as we prepare the way for his return.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for being with us. David Lister, you're down in the South. How are you?
I'm all right. A beautiful day today.
Praise the Lord. God bless you,
Fall
David.
is coming.
Yeah, it's about mid-October. Jay, how are you?
I'm good. I am back in California. It's good to be home for now.
Yeah. You're a traveling man. Definitely traveling. Yeah, trying.
I'm doing my best Jacob Prash impersonation, but I can't do it as much as he does it.
Got a long way to go, huh?
Yeah.
Well, welcome back, Jay. Davey, how are you down in Australia?
Yeah, doing pretty good, and so glad to hear all my friends in Florida are safe.
Amen.
Amen.
Saturday morning in Australia. Jacob, any announcements you want to make
Very
sure?
briefly, the Yarnfield Conference in England, which is basically for people in England and Wales, but anyone can come. The speakers will be Marco Quintana, Pastor Tim Worth, and myself, and we'll be looking at the theme of prophecy and velocity, the way that the pace of prophetic events are increasing. The velocity is increasing. Things are happening faster and faster. This is based on a concept I introduced a number of years ago in a teaching called the Vector. But of course, we're updating it in the light of present world events and technological developments. However, it is completely sold out. We cannot get anyone else in. They've given us the biggest facility they have, and it's just all gone. And there's fire regulations that they're bound to keep. So we are bound to keep, and rightly so. But we cannot get anyone else into Yarnfield in England. However, the same lineup of speakers, Pastor Marco, Pastor Leach, and myself, will be at the Montreal, Scotland Prophecy Conference. Now, it'll be a prophecy conference also, but it will be a different theme, and it will be a different format. I will be outlining the essential construction of my next book, Born in a Manger, Coming in a Cloud, and we are going to do something we've never done before, have an interactive question and answer time on the subject of prophecy with myself, Marco, and Tim Leach, and anyone can field any questions, and then people can question the answers. It'll be an interactive format. Now, the reason we can do this is because the Scotland Conference is considerably smaller, much smaller than the England Conference. However, while the England Conference is completely booked up, there are still places available in the Scotland Conference. If you go to the Montreal website, montreal.org, and just click on the itinerary page, or if you just Google Montreal itinerary, you can register for the Scotland Conference. Mark Gillen will be happy to take your bookings. That'll be the first weekend in November, the 1st to the 3rd of November. Marco, myself, and Tim Leach, we shall be there. Before we meet up again in America, about 2 or 3 weeks after that, we'll be in Florida. We'll be on the East Coast of New York, Baltimore, Tennessee, I think the West Coast. But first of all, the conferences in England and Scotland, and it will be the three of us. Prior to that, on the 24th of October, I shall be, or I'm scheduled to be, with Pastor Stephen Tremble at Calvary Pentecostal Church in Newton Abbey, 7 p.m. Newton Abbey is immediately adjacent Belfast. Then I shall be in Bangor at a men's meeting on the 25th of October. The 26th and 27th, as usual, I will be with Pastor Marty Foster at Agape Christian Fellowship on Orangefield Crescent. The details for this is, again, all these details are on the Montreal website as to times and venues. Finally, on the 28th of October, I shall be in Donegal, not in Northern Ireland, but in the Republic of Ireland, in Donegal at Ballybuffet at Jackson's Hotel and Ballybuffet, a well-known venue. We've had meetings there before. That'll be 7 p.m. on Monday, the 28th in County Donegal, Republic of Ireland. After that, the 1st to the 3rd of November will be the Scotland Conference. If you are in Northern Ireland, we have people from Northern Ireland who come to the Scotland Conference, and we have people from the north of England who come to the Scotland Conference. It's at Gartmore House, Gartmore Castle. It is not far from Glasgow, Strathclyde, Edinburgh, or the M8. It's quite accessible. It's in the beginning of the Highlands, a very pretty area. If you can join us, we still have places available for the Prophecy Conference in Scotland. Hope to see you then. Thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you, Jacob. And I'm looking forward to our meetings there with Pastor Leach, you, myself being there. We were discussing earlier some of the topics that we want to address. And I think people are going to be very blessed by the Word of God and some of the topics that are going to be discussed. So I don't think people should miss it. And but if they can't get to England, get to Scotland, there's some available spots there. So please sell your shirt, come see Jacob, and this November. So it's coming up very, very quickly. Plus, the lectures are going to be at the same time. Just after we have the conference, before the England one and after the Scottish one. That's going to be interesting because I'm going to be keeping an eye on what's going on at home since I won't be home during that time. David Lister, any announcements you got?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to my camera here, but due to the hurricanes,
Here you are.
here we go. Due to the hurricanes, we've had to change the venue where we're going to be holding the conference. Now, the conference is concerning the topic is holding on to our first love in the last days, Revelation 2, 4, and 5. It will be November 29th and 30th from 9 to 4, and it will be at the Citrus Hills Golf and Country Club in Hernando, Florida, 34442. We've our hotel that we were in and conference center, which we were all looking forward to, got kind of hit by Helen, and so they're out of commission. But this conference, they do have a. We're not charging for the conference, but if you come, they have buffets that are $30 a day. So you can we consider that a donation and you can eat. But if you're a pensioner or can't afford that, just let Mia or me know and we can take care of that. So, so that's, we have all this on the website. Okay. It will be Jacob and Tim Leach, and then one session by my longtime disciple and friend, Eric Wallhausen, is going to do a teaching. Basically, he's been doing home churches and Bible studies. And so building blocks for the biblical model of a church. So it's real interesting. Biblical models for Moriel Church. So we have a different place we have to stay at. You can get those details on the itinerary. They have a special rate for us. And so check that out on the itinerary. Page. Marco's frozen.
This is the fourth time Marco's frozen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe all this is overwhelming. Jay?
Well, I guess we'll try to move forward. The first thing we should talk about is maybe that you can find our podcasts on all of the different stations. We have Podchasers. Obviously, you can find us on Apple, Amazon, TuneIn. Please make yourself available to listen to our podcast. It's a great way if you're traveling, if you're coming to see us down in Florida, to maybe download a few podcasts and listen to them. Obviously, if you don't have the internet, you could download them to your device and listen to them whenever it's convenient. It looks like Marco, are you back?
I think I'm back. I don't understand, but perhaps the topics we're going to be discussing, it's too hot for the internet to take us.
We had that X2 microburst, that's screwing with everything out of the sun, which is a pretty heavy duty solar flare. So that's been messing with Verizon and a lot of people. So you're back there, man.
Well, I'm going to sign up for Starlink and put it on David Lister's credit card. And
that's right.
We won't have any issues. No, I'm back. Thank you so much. Well, hopefully this doesn't continue. So that's good. Thank you, David. Thank you, Jay. And welcome those who are watching live. And we welcome you in the name of the Lord. And you can avail yourself of all the podcasts and all the teachings. And plus, we're going to be developing our website. So please keep in prayer the website, Moriel.org, Moriel.tv. We'll be updating it. And it'll be, I promise you this, that the Lord's in it. And I believe the Lord's going to give us a really good website for people to go and navigate and be able to share it much easier than you are today. So keep us in prayer for that. However, we are where we are today. We got lots of topics today, and we got to get through them. So, Jacob Prash, are you ready?
I'm about ready.
All right, Jacob. I
got to tell you, I'm so excited that you're coming over to the UK with Tim and myself. We have people coming from Switzerland, Poland, Australia.
Wow, it's going to be really a world of Christians coming together. Not worldly Christians, but a world of Christians coming together. The nations under Christ, all the nations under Christ, Jew and Gentile together in Jesus.
No pressure, Marco. Now you really got to be at your peak.
Well, we got some topics that we definitely want everybody to hear, and we want to proclaim the gospel until he comes. So until everyone hears the gospel, that's what we are laboring and striving every day. And I know Jacob works really hard at it. David Lister works really hard at it. Everybody here on this panel works really hard at getting the gospel out. So please keep us in prayer. The enemy's always on the prowl. The enemy is always like a roaring lion trying to devour, seeking those who may devour. So keep us in prayer. Jacob Prash, 24 days before the election, we'll be together, probably watching the election of some sort during the 5th of November. But you got 24 days before that time. It seems like the Kamala Harris is trying to do interviews, but not with like real journalists. But at least on CBS got caught, not only giving her some really tough questions, but they edit it and literally transpose all the questions and answers to make it seem like she was answering a question. That was a different answer. It was a different answer to that question. It was about Israel. It was about the economy. It was about the borders. She absolutely was destroyed by the CBS had to come in and save her. They've been running interference, of course, on the election. Is that what we were going to call election interference? They ran cover for Biden on the Hunter Biden laptop back in 2020. So your thoughts on it? She's got a lot of issues, including this one.
What do we expect from the mainstream media? But when you have people, and I've watched interviews with some of them who are so stupid. I mean, I don't know how to explain them. I'm not trying to demean them, but they have an absence of logic. A lot of them seem to be people who don't know how to think. And then they're not all women. There's men. They just don't know how to think. They don't know how to put two and two together. They're talking about how she is going to solve the border crisis. When she came into power, there was no border crisis.
That's right.
You know, how she is going to get the inflation down and solve the economic issues. When she came into office, there was no inflation. There are actually people who are that stupid, that conditioned through the mainstream media, through a failed school system, through whatever. I personally have to agree with those around the world now, not just America, who are telling me these people are under a spiritual delusion. It's difficult to believe that that many people can be that conspicuously and obviously stupid. They've been given over to a spirit of stupor. They're spiritually blind. Again, we've been telling people, please pray that she does not get elected. And I'm not campaigning for Donald Trump. I'm just saying, please, may the Lord prevent that wicked, incompetent, immoral woman from getting elected.
David, she goes to these talk shows, right? It's not even an interview. Well, CBS, I wouldn't call it an interview, but at least she was asked some tough questions. But she goes to talk shows, Howard Stern. She goes to Stephen Colbert. She has a beer and Doritos, and she says she's one of us because she eats Doritos and she drinks a beer. Well, the whole country is in shambles in the East Coast, from Georgia to Florida to East Tennessee to West North Carolina. She provides no relief, very little. 5 days later, sends more money to Lebanon, which, AKA Hezbollah, and yet she's able to just laugh about it like nothing's happening. I mean, Nero laughed when when Rome burnt, but is she that out there? I mean, is she demonically inspired and possessed to this degree? David Lister, did we lose you?
We lost you, David.
Oh, it's David.
You muted, David?
Yeah.
You need to mute, David.
Jacob, you can take that one. The Doritos, the beer, the country's burning. The economy is completely shut.
The woman continually serves word salads and circumlocutes. She avoids the issue. Whenever she's asked a sticky question, she begins talking about something else and serves a word salad. And there's people who accept it. And the media tries to edit and compensate for it. It is beyond ridiculous.
It is.
It is beyond ridiculous. It is like a nation of morons. It's beyond ridiculous.
Jacob, she says she shouldn't be criticized because they provided help to East Tennessee and Carolina 5 days after people started, they started having body bags and they finally came 5 days later. She says, I shouldn't be criticized. Even the FEMA director says, stop with the tough questions because it's ruining morale.
Yeah, don't ask the questions about why so much money is being diverted from Homeland Security, which FEMA comes under, to illegal immigrants who have no legal right to be in the country, while American citizens affected by a natural disaster are being devastated. Don't ask about the misallocation and misappropriation of taxpayer money. Don't question it. It'll hurt our morale. This, again, is another example of their attack on free speech of the First Amendment. Don't question us. That is exactly Kas Pravda Izvestia. That is exactly the history of the Roman Catholic papacy. Don't question us. It's unpatriotic to question us.
She seems the only thing she cares about is abortion, the curtailing free speech, and sending more money to terrorist organizations, suppressing free speech. Jacob, give me a scenario. She wins. What would happen to Christians, pastors that, like yourself, teachers like yourself that are outspoken? What are we going to come under fire?
She will do what Trudeau did in Canada. She'll take us in that direction. Already under Garland, the mechanisms are in place to having politically weaponized the FBI and the deep state generally. That is going to be unleashed. Something else that will be unleashed is you're going to see the threats of actual full-scale embargoes on Israel. Israel from defending itself. That is the second effect that you will see. Thirdly, you will see an increase in racism and woke being integrated into government policies, more so than it already is.
What's going to happen to the healthcare of children? I mean, are they going to bring it into hyperspeed now?
What's going to happen to national defense? You have a pair of incompetence. You've got a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who was there because of affirmative action, not ability or experience. And you have Austin, a Secretary of Defense who's there for the same reason. Now, I would love to see a Black Secretary of Defense or a Black American National Security Advisor. His name is Congressman Allen West, but they'll never appoint a competent Black. They'll only appoint an affirmative action woke Black.
Yes.
Because that is their agenda, not the good of the country.
I mean, the question I think we need to ask ourselves is Kamala Harris the one we want facing down geopolitically with somebody like Vladimir Putin, who intellectually speaking would make mincemeat of her? I mean, I don't I just don't see how anybody can have confidence that she is going to be able to counteract him in any way.
Or even the Ayatollah Khomeini. I mean, dealing with Iran. Don't they have an issue with women like this?
Of course. They all want her. Putin wants her.
Yes.
China wants her. Iran wants her. Anyone inimical towards the United States wants her as president because they know she's incompetent. They know that she's dishonest. They know she's immoral. They know what they can get away with because you'll have not just a weak president, you'll have somebody who's not just weak. We've had weak presidents. Biden, Obama, we've had weak presidents. You'll have somebody who is beyond incompetent, someone who is beyond literally a cackling bimbo, and the world knows it. The only ones that don't know she is a cackling bimbo are the women who watch The View.
So she's on the spectrum. She's on the spectrum.
She was recently on there, and you couldn't get an answer except for just laughing and abortion and more wars and Jacob, I came across this video. It is one of the worst videos I've probably ever seen. It's supposed to be a TikTok, some kind of trend where somebody eats something in a sexualized way, and you had Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, with Liz Plank, a Canadian feminist, lesbian, pretending to have some kind of Catholic mass ritual, taking communion, but she's doing it. And she's got a hat that says Harrison Walls. It was so sexual with this 2002 hookup song that playing in the background. Jacob, I mean, this is a shot. She's a scoffer. She's going after general terms Christians.
Look, I theologically disagree with Roman Catholicism. However, I do agree with the rights of Catholics. We have seen Roman Catholics' rights violated repeatedly by the government and by the media. We have seen Obama and Biden try to force Roman Catholics or Roman Catholic institutions to provide abortion services and things of this nature that are contrary to the professed dogma of the Catholic Church. We have seen traditional Catholics being put on FBI terror watch lists, and even the U.S. military warning that traditional Catholics are a danger to national security. Now we are seeing this. Again, I do not theologically agree with Roman Catholicism, and I openly accept the fact that the Roman Catholic Church has been so discredited by the widespread international pedophilia and by the policies of the present Pope. It's made itself vulnerable to being attacked, to being ridiculed. However, we must still respect the rights of Catholics. Not agree with them, but respect their rights. They're being targeted.
Yes.
They would never do that to Muslims. They would never do that to homosexuals. They're doing it only to people who profess Christianity in the broad sense. And their hatred of evangelicals and born-again Christians is worse than their hatred of Catholics.
That's right. You had that guy that he was dressed up as a woman. He's probably transgender in this case. Who was talking about Jesus being nailed on the cross. He was using a sexualized way of describing that.
Anybody can get nailed for 3 days is my kind of guy. This is blasphemy.
Yeah. Okay, so this Liz Plank, she's a Canadian. She's known as the Instagram lesbian. So why would you do that unless you're really trying to sexualize your audience? And by the way, the whole podcast was about abortion. There was nothing else but abortion and how
abortion.
Harris is going to be, because she's going to allow all this. And to me, that, Gretchen Whitmer, that's her Jesus, Harris, she's her Jesus. That's what she wants. She wants abortion. She wants to be part of that cabinet. And she's backed up by, of course, Georgie Porgy. And she was able to win because of a lot of this funding that came. But who are they trying to appeal, Jacob? I mean, it's bizarre. Who are they trying to appeal?
First of all, I'll tell you who they're trying to gratify. Their father, the devil.
Oh.
They are of their father, the devil. There is a demonic power on back of this. Now, look, as a professing Bible-believing Judeo-Christian, I do not believe in extramarital or premarital sex. I was a fornicator. Before I was a believer, Jesus paid for what I did, but I'm against anything extramarital. But even if I wasn't, why, when you have spermicide and IUDs and temporary vasectomies and all these other alternatives, why would you use abortion as a form of birth control when there are means to prevent unwanted pregnancies? Why would you say, no, just get pregnant and then abort the baby? Now, even if I accepted a moral validity to premarital or extramarital sex, which I don't, but even if I did, with the variety of birth control available, why would you have abortion? Why would you use abortion as a form of birth control when you can prevent the pregnancy to begin with? It just shows you how sick and depraved society has become, how sick and depraved feminism has become, and I believe there is a demonic power on back of it.
For the sale of medical infant tissues to not only the medical industrial complex, but also now to different corporations that make all sorts of wonderful food additives. So this is why abortion is hoisted up as something that is desirable. It's because it makes money.
Yeah.
It makes tons of money.
China, James, what you're saying, James, there are companies in China harvesting collagen and harvesting stem cells from aborted embryos for the commercial use in cosmetics.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Another thing.
You're back. They're back.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm back. I guess we're having sunspot activity that's messing with us, So anyway, Paul talks about also, I think there's a curse here that's come upon these. They've lost their natural affection.
Yes.
Which is a result of all this sin. How can a mother take, knowing what it's like to have a child, to be able to then sterilize that child and make sure that child can never have a child? And it's, if they actually loved that child, they couldn't do this, but Paul talks about women will lose their natural affection. And
correct.
And so they can kill them. They can kill them. They can mutilate them. They can turn them into, in their own minds, a boy into a girl. This is how far they've fallen.
Yes. I've said this before, David, with regard to what you're pointing out. I saw it in my own family, and we all have. When my wife was pregnant with her first child, when my daughter was expecting her first child, my first grandchild, when my sister was expecting her first baby, you see a woman changes not only physiologically, but psychologically.
Yeah.
There is nothing more antithetical to the God-given nature of a woman, the maternal instinct. There is nothing more antithetical to the nature of a woman than to kill her own baby, than to abort a baby. Once a woman is expecting a baby her entire life, it changes gear and it becomes focused on the epicentricity of that child coming and the anticipation of the child coming and so forth. And her husband stands with her in that. That is the natural, even non-Christians, even people who are not believers, because it's the God-given nature to women.
Yep.
What you are seeing is something that is anti-natural. And the reason it's anti-natural is because it's demonic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jacob,
I remember your daughter, Jacob.
Go ahead.
When she had her baby, she had the number of weeks off that Britain allows. She didn't want to go back. And this was a woman that's very successful at a top law firm in the UK, was willing to give it all up.
Yes, she did.
Mother.
That's right.
Yeah, this is really interesting. In my generation, when we were younger and we were kids, most of my generation understood that it was wrong. Even at that point, it was wrong to kill a baby. It was wrong. We didn't want to do it. We all agreed that no matter what, and there are people that did it. Don't get me wrong. There were people and classmates and that did it, but they all knew one thing, Jacob. They all knew it was wrong to do. They were ashamed of it. The new generation that's here now sees it as a right. That's something that it's demanded that they would need, and therefore they don't consider. We all knew it was a baby, even back in the late 80s, early 90s. We all knew it was a baby, and the technology that we have now, it's even better than we had then.
Yes, it
now,
is.
no excuse to not think of it as a baby, but yet that young generation says it's cells, it's not viable, it's not sentient.
Parasite.
They absolutely have lost any thinking, any compassion, any thinking, and because all they say is, well, it is healthcare, and these things are not; these are just cells. So it is radical the way it's changed over a generation.
Actually,
It is, but it also shows that the Hippocratic Oath means nothing.
Yeah. Jacob,
actually, I saw a video well worth looking at during the week too of a baby in the womb, and you can actually see the baby smile. It physically smiles as the dad's talking to it from outside the womb.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how old the baby was, but it's a really touching video.
Here's one question, Jacob, and this was survey just recently done at the Arizona Christian University. 32 million Christians, little c, I'm not saying these are evangelical Christians, all of them, but are not going to vote. They're willing not to vote, and some of them are adamant not to vote this year because they're just disgusted by Trump and they're disgusted by Harris. Your thoughts on that? That's a pretty large number. I don't know how accurate this is. Obviously, I would like to see more numbers, but let's just say on an average, it's close to that number. What is that going to swing one way or the other?
I think a lot of born-again Christians are motivated to vote. I think it's going to be more nominal Christians who are less motivated to vote. I could be wrong. I do think Christians are motivated to vote, but I understand the sentiment. Nobody in their right mind should vote for Harris. But what about somebody like me who voted for Donald Trump twice, wanted to vote for him again, and then sees what happened at Mar-a-Lago with his gala, what his wife is saying about she is being pro-abortion, what he is saying about the Florida fetal heartbeat law, 6 weeks is too soon. You got to be able to abort a baby, even though its heart is beating longer than 6 weeks. And now, of course, he wants to not decriminalize, but legalize the recreational use of cannabis for persons over 21, which the scripture calls pharmakia. I can understand why other people share my views, that we can no longer consider Donald Trump to be a pro-life candidate. He's nothing more than a lesser of two evils, but a lesser of evils is an evil no less. We are in a bad situation. I can understand those people, but I think there are alternatives. You can protest vote for a third-party candidate. You can still make a political statement. We need to try to be salt and light. We do that with the prayers, we do that with our lives, and we do that with the living.
Amen.
The only thing politicians will care about at election time is getting reelected. And if enough born-again Christians, saved Christians, were saying, look, we can only support a candidate who's pro-life, that unless it's necessary to save the life of the mother or something like this in a medically, statistically rare situation, or an ectopic pregnancy or fallopian pregnancy or something, unless it is a medical rarity to save the life of the mother or something like that, we do not agree with abortion. We're not going to support a candidate who does. You can force politicians. Now, of course, politicians being politicians will lie the way Ronald Reagan did when he said he was pro-life, but did nothing about abortion and appointed a horribly pro-abortion judge to the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor, who was a very wicked, wicked woman. She really was the daughter of the devil. She wrote the court's decision outlawing the Texas anti-sodomy laws that opened the door for same-sex marriage nationally. And she was appointed by Reagan. She wrote the decision ordering the 10 Commandments out of the judicial building in Alabama. She was a wicked, wicked woman appointed by Reagan. The Republicans have been very good liars to manipulate born-again Christians into thinking that they share our values. But when you look at them, they really don't. That was certainly true of Ronald Reagan, and unfortunately, it's becoming true of Donald Trump. I don't know what the answer is. We can pray, but what can we do?
Well,
Jacob,
you can vote for Dr. Mark Green, who is your representative, who's a veteran. He's a godly man. He's a Christian, and he is your representative. And he's against all this, and also Tennessee has 2 good senators that are standing and very conservative in their views. So you could at least try to help. Someone could at least try to help on that aspect of the vote. If they can't vote for a Trump, they could make sure that the other side doesn't get their way, something like that.
Jacob, I want to bring this up. So we got evangelicals for Harris, and there seems to be, although not a growing number, but there's that side of it. But I did want to ask you about what the Democratic Party is concerned about. African Americans, blacks are going more toward Trump. I think it's like 26%, and they're losing it. And Barack Obama just berated black men just recently at his speech, calling them, cowards. They didn't want to vote for Harris anymore. They're, basically calling them, racist in a sense, because they don't like Harris, and misogynist because they don't like Harris. Your thoughts on that? It was something to see. He berated them, and a lot of black men are very upset.
He was accusing them of sexism and not voting for her because she was a woman. That's what he was saying. And he said he has a problem with what they're doing. Again, he is what's Harriet Beecher Stowe in Uncle Tom's Cabin called a Sambo. A Sambo is what people mistakenly call an Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom was not an Uncle Tom in the book or the play. He was flogged to death by Simone Legree for not disclosing where runaway slaves were hiding. The real blacks who collaborated with the plantation owners against other blacks were the Sambos, from Sambo Tom in the book. And that's what Barack Obama is. He is a Sambo. He is simply a black stooge for the white establishment. I obviously did not share the religious views of Malcolm X. Politically, sometimes I agreed with him, sometimes I didn't. But as David Lister frequently says, he was right about one thing. The worst thing that could happen to black Americans is white liberals. Quoting Malcolm X, Barack Obama is simply a stooge for the anti-black white establishment. They want these blacks in these schools where they're going to fail. This is the policy of the mayor of Chicago. Right now, it's the policy of Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, to placate these teachers' unions that are failing, putting the city already in debt, in greater debt, to placate the teachers' unions, of which he used to be a member, keeping the black man down. So you're black and you are illiterate. So the only way you can get ahead is by voting for us. We'll hire a certain amount of blacks. We'll push for affirmative action. We'll push for quotas for blacks. That's the only way you're going to get ahead, is if you vote for us. They make the blacks unqualified. They engineer socially a school system designed to fail the inner city youth in order to prevent them from reaching the socioeconomic potential you see with whites, with increasing numbers of Hispanics, and with Asians. Keep the black man down. That's what Barack Obama represents. Even worse is the mayor of Chicago, Johnson. It is unbelievable. That is what Harris is. These are the Sambo Toms. They must create a permanent underclass. But some blacks are beginning to wake up.
I'd say many are beginning to wake up.
Yeah, David Lister, basically he berated, rebuked, scolded black men for not voting for Harris, and this is what the This is a term they use for Harris. It's Madam Lock a Brother Up. That's what they call her. Madam Lock a Brother Up. And I mean, absolutely right. The things that she did, incarcerating for very little crime, for almost no crime, and they've never forgotten that. And the shame of Barack Obama to go out there and do that. And a lot of black men are very upset. Is that going to turn the tide, you think, a little bit from 26% to maybe an uptick?
I hope it does, because like Jacob said, poor neighborhood, poor school. Well, that's what Malcolm X said. He said, if you are, and that's just like, and he was telling them, and I've been saying a lot of these things for 40 years, but a lot are waking up. A lot of rap singers are starting to put within their music, even using the term MAGA. Charlemagne the God, a big, he has a big blog and everything. He's saying, look, the Dems have forgot about us. They're not helping us. He says, I don't want to pay for criminals to have sex change operations. And he says the policies of Trump are more appealing to him than Kamala Harris. They're not falling for the same old lies. They're actually starting to see that they're being replaced. We've talked about before the replacement theory. Well, they're actually living in it, because blacks have been able to be population controlled through abortion to when they were 20% of the population in the 50s. Now they're like 12 and 13%. So it's actually working. And Hispanics now are 20% and going to raise up in the next, even more than that, in the next census here in 5 or 6 more years. So they're seeing it. They've got nothing to lose.
I wonder if that is going to be the game changer there. Hispanics traditionally, and especially the last 4 or 5 years, have gone more toward the conservative side. The black community is going that way. And when you have people like Obama berating them, and you got Madam Lock a Brother Up, it's going to be very difficult to overturn that. That's why they're on the news. They're berating black people, that they're not being smart by voting for a racist. And the guys are coming out and saying, well, how is he racist? We looked at all the videos. Yeah. He's not. But that's the media. They
not even just lock them up, Marco. She kept them past their sentences.
That's right. That's what you get for being
extra punishment for smoking pot that she herself
smoked herself.
That's right. That's right. I wanted to address this real quick. I want to switch gears because of the hurricane relief and the lack of relief from FEMA. But we've been getting a lot of questions on the possibility of this being a geoengineering, climate change manipulation by governments and officials. And this is called weather wars, right? And I know this is controversial. We're going to look like people are going to think we're crazy about this, but looking at it, from cloud seeding to pulse vibration and energy manipulation, geoengineering, climate control, what they call it. It's a reality that we have to face, from 1947 to this Project Cirrus to Popeye, Operation Popeye in the 70s within Vietnam War, the KC-135 planes. It is cutting off precipitation. These countries have been doing it. One city will get rain, another city won't get rain. That's Brandon, ex-CIA. And we got the video from Lyndon Johnson in 1962, Southwestern University in Texas, saying that he who controls the weather controls the world. 11 years ago, they had that Japanese physicist on CBS 11 years ago saying, we use lasers to control all this. Jacob, we'll start with you. Just a few years ago, people thought we were crazy, or would think that we were crazy just bringing this up. Now that it's probably a topic that a lot of people are going, wait a minute, these things did happen. These things are they did say these things. Your thoughts on it, because it's been reported from the BBC to CBS to CNN. They've all reported it, but yet we haven't been able to catch on to that yet.
Well, this is one of the topics we're hoping to address at the Yarnfield Conference in England. The control over the elements and over the forces of nature. It is known that if you carry out nuclear detonations with sufficient megatonnage, close to a fault zone, subterranean nuclear detonations near a fault zone, you can cause earthquakes. Okay? Now, the Bible speaks about an increase in earthquakes, okay, an increase in seismic activity. What happens when that increase is humanly induced? Just this past week, there were tremors in Iran. Is Iran testing nuclear weapons underground so people will not know that they're testing them terrestrially? Okay. That's right this week. Now it becomes the weather. People have talked about things like cloud seeding for some time, but now they have begun to look at how to replicate the effects of solar radiation and metallic substances and particles and frozen bits of frozen particles, just basically frozen particles, which are ionized in clouds, and people doing it. And they're already making progress in doing it. Man taking over the weather. Thirdly, it comes hand in hand, not just what's happening in geology and seismology or in meteorology. We're seeing it, as we've been saying, in biogenetic engineering. You shall not mix the seed. When biogenetic engineering begins giving rats 1% human DNA, what happens when you create animals with approximating human levels of intelligence or less, at least higher intelligence? What is the outcome of that going to be? Well, that is what we're seeing. What had traditionally been the domain of nature, ultimately in the hands of God, fallen man is thinking he can take control of it. We're seeing it biologically, we're seeing it seismologically, and we're seeing it meteorologically. Again, we'll be looking at this at the Arnfield Conference in England.
Yeah, David, we'll go to you. Weather Manipulation Control Center in Dubai. They published it. They say, yeah, we've been doing it. And they actually stopped quite a bit and actually flooded. China said that they were going to have a certain weather because they're manipulating it for the Olympics. India's concerned because of the weather wars.
Fair day.
Yeah, a weather war with India. So this is called Climate Intervention Operation. Climate Intervention Operation. Anybody can look at it and they can see even what Brandon said is called SAI, Alter Weather Patterns. Stratospheric aerosol injection. So these technologies have been patented, they've been there. Now it seems like they've been unleashed to a certain degree or another. Congressmen from Tennessee, your state, and North Carolina have been briefed on this. They're going to bring it to the congressional hearings. I think a lot of people are going to realize that, boy, this is bigger than we thought. But there's a spiritual element to it that Jacob was alluding to. Your thoughts on this?
Well, first off, we know what people that get power desire more power. So they want to control and they use it for evil. And this is what's happened. Instead of trying to help America out when we're having a drought, they want to destroy. And so you have this HAARP, which is able to ionize and deionize the atmosphere and use microwaves to heat up particles within thousandths of a degree that will speed up a hurricane, will slow it down, will steer it, and also they can heat up. And like even Bill Gates who said, "Oh, look, I got this thing. I can go out, cool the water down in the Gulf." And so he can, so if he can cool the water, they can heat up the water. So they're using this to destroy water, but also with these microwaves, they can actually heat up the water within the earth and cause earthquakes. So these are now going to be weaponized. And as we were talking earlier, very possible for the Antichrist to use, to create signs and wonders for people to be amazed but for so long, I didn't even believe in chemtrails. I didn't. But then I started seeing more and more evidence that And then I saw a movie called The Dimming, which everybody should watch. They want to make the Earth have less heat, and so the government started doing this and doing cloud seeding, and so for water, but also to cool us off. And also they're doing from the ground, from ships, being able to produce actual clouds. And then those clouds can be seeded for water, and Dubai, I don't think they, or the United Arab Immigrants, sorry, they got it, they went and tried to get a little bit of rain in their desert. They ended up having like a river come right down the middle of Main Street. They got it wrong, and this is what's happened is they don't, unlike God, they've created things. And even this, the latest Helen, and I'm now 70 years of age, and I've never seen a typhoon make it to Mexico and not keep going. But this one changed course and came around and came towards Florida. And then the other one that seems to have been steered up to make sure that this flood, which happened in North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, happened in a place that the government has been wanting to mine lithium. They believe this is the largest lithium deposit in the world. And I know it's a coincidence, but 4 days before the hurricane, a company applied for permits from the government of the United States and also from the state to get permits to mine. And then on top of that, we've seen that the people that live in that town of Castle Rock, where the mine happens to be, is they have been told they're no longer property owners because of the Republicans passed a bill on eminent domain that in the Supreme Court that they can take your their land, your property, without a trial. Just say it's for the public good. So that was a Republican Supreme Court.
That's the UN 30 right there. No private property. You can take it away. No private
property. And also, so those people are no longer landowners, but they'll throw them a bone, and it won't have no meat on it, but they'll give them a bone or something, make them go away. But it's this whole, I didn't believe in all this stuff. But the evidence is so overwhelming. I listen to generals, major generals, are talking about how they were doing this in the 60s and 70s, and they were trying to make it rain in Vietnam so that Hanoi couldn't bring weapons down the trail.
Jimmy Trail.
Yeah, and if you ever saw that movie with Tom Hanks on
Forrest Gump?
Forrest Gump. Well, he talked about the rain coming sideways. The rain's coming this way, the rain going that way and this way, because he was kind of mocking the way it was always raining there. And they were trying to use this. And, so they can do this stuff. They're doing it for evil, and they want to control people. And oh, by the way, the people from Alder that provide for those permits happened to have bought 2 million shares, was bought by BlackRock and Vanguard just a week or so before.
Perfect timing.
In that same mining company. Surprise, surprise, BlackRock.
Jay, we'll go over to you. According to BBC, it's $100 billion industry. That was a few years ago. It's probably more now. We have that technology that's patented. It's called patented hurricane suppression technology. This is something. Look, people can watch the video by the Japanese physicist, Mr. Michio Kaku. I think it's his name.
Yep.
I think
he's American.
Michio Kaku.
American
of Japanese descent. Yeah.
Japanese descent. Yeah. Talk about lasers. And so this is not in any way in the invention of any sort.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, and like Mr. Kennedy says, there's no conspiracy theories. It's all come true. I think they're winning 39-0. And so all the evidence points to this reality. Now, the only thing is, there's a spiritual side to it, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, a couple of things to begin with. Remember what they say, anyone who denies that there is climate change, there's a consensus from all scientists in the world. There's climate change. Well, the climate change is because they manipulate the weather and have been for over 60 years, 70 years. And
Jay, notice they say man-made climate change?
Yes.
Yeah, we now know who the men are that are making it.
Yes. So it's almost as if it's a shell game. Climate change to take away fossil fuel cars from you, drive up the price of oil for their interests, and at the very same time, they're the ones that are causing the climate change, and we're never getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
I would just like to point out that, things like HARP, things like cloud seeding, these are very old technologies.
Right.
These are incredibly old. And what they're using today, remember, the way that the government releases what they use for top secret, it's about 20 to 30 years, gap between us knowing about it and them deploying it. So what they're using to manipulate weather, we have no idea nowadays. We can know like civilian projects like they have in Dubai and the Arab Emirates, but as far as like Davey was mentioning, the spiritual aspect, God withheld the rain from Israel as a punishment. And yet Ahab now can control the weather. Yep. And this has all been since the 50s. Walt Disney talked about it and did a whole short video about it. The world of modern marvels. Weather control.
When I lived in Pittsburgh in the early 90s, I went to a lecture out at Squirrel Hill. And there were two scientists there that helped invent fiber optics in the 30s.
Yeah.
And they helped invent Gorilla Glass. And, they were asked, well, why didn't it take so long? He says we invented it. We could see all the theory and that it worked, but it was too expensive. It wasn't until you got millions and millions of cell phones was Gorilla Glass became useful. A little piece, $3-4, and also fiber optics until we had the technology. So you're right. They invent things and it takes time to get it so it's useful and can make money.
Yep.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I was just thinking too, wasn't only just Walt Disney. I remember his Eyes in Outer Space is a 1959 short film that dealt with it, but in the early 60s, even cartoon shows like Tennessee Tuxedo dealt with it. So technology's been around for a while.
Yeah, so we have things like weather wars that are being, they're being fought. I mean, if you look at the UN, there's resolutions about countries not going into these wars, not that they pay attention to them, just after the Vietnam War because of what they did in Vietnam. And that's a resolution that's like stated, it's documented. And so we're seeing this, but the spiritual aspect of it it's the interesting part more than anything else, because it leads to something beyond. Right. It needs something beyond physics, beyond the natural science. And that is at some point or another, these men claiming to be God will claim that they can control the weather. And for Israel, it was Baal worship. They didn't need God for rain anymore. They can just go to Baal and get the harvest. Men are going to Baals. They're going to the false gods. Eventually, it's going to go the Antichrist. And they're going to remember when Gates boasted about he will at some point be able to darken the sun. He'll be able to block the sun. He'll be able to darken.
Do that.
And China has tried to do that a few times already. So in the Bible, it was always God who brought the rain. Now we don't need God. We can do it ourselves. we could be the determining factor of who gets the rain, who doesn't get the rain, based on who's for us and who's not, who's against us, in a sense of government, world governments like this. So I remember Zechariah 14. I think it's a great passage. In the millennial kingdom, Jesus withhold the rain from Egypt because of their rebellion, not coming to worship the Lord on the Feast of Tabernacles. So these men are trying to be God. They're trying to manipulate everything possible using natural science, using scientific things, and of course the occult, to try to bring about a worship of men, which will culminate in the worship of those the Antichrist, of course, and the false prophet. So much to say about that, and we'll be talking about it in England. So make sure you don't miss that, because we're going to unveil some things, some videos, some concepts that we haven't talked about before. So it is going to be at a very deep spiritual. This is a very deep spiritual nature, because man is trying to be God, controlling who's born, who's not, controlling food supply, which eventually will be the Antichrist, or the mark of the beast, controlling weather, controlling signs in the heavens, which the Bible speaks about, that he will be able to do that. And the false prophet will do it in the presence of the beast, so which gets the power from the dragon. So much to say about that. And that's coming up.
One quick thing, Marco.
Yeah, go ahead.
William Brennan, the ex-CIA director, when we were paying him, he lied and said there was no such thing as all these chemtrails and all that sort of stuff. But now there's a video out of him on the paid circuit, private paid circuit, where you get $20,000 for a 1-hour speech.
Council of Foreign Relations. That's what he was speaking.
Yeah, and he started talking about, we can do all this stuff. We've been doing this for a while. So with he's lying and covering it up. But when he's getting paid a second time, plus he's getting a pension from us, now he's out there saying, "Oh yeah, this is a good thing, man. We're doing this."
Jacob, did he become a Muslim?
Well,
be rumors about him coming to Islam.
There were rumors about what was it? Grover North?
Norquist. Yeah.
Norquist, yeah. There's definitely rumors about him. Brendan, some people have suggested it, but there's no proof.
Right.
What is obvious is that he was one of the people who signed that letter saying that Hunter Biden's laptop,
he's one of those.
And that, that it is obvious that he and Clapper should have been prosecuted.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. He hates Christians, by the way. He's come out and said it. He hates Christianity. He hates the evangelicals because they said they create too much trouble. They should be censored. I want to switch gears to the wars and rumors of wars. And tomorrow, Jacob, in Germany, we're going to have a NATO meeting.
Yes.
It's a NATO meeting in Germany for perhaps, this is what a lot of people are speculating, the approval of missiles into the use of missiles, American and British missiles into Russian territory. They moved about 250,000 troops to counteract what Russia's doing. So we're heading toward that road, and Russia's not doing well economically. Neither is China. They're calling for a BRICS emergency meeting to try to deal with it. Your thoughts on NATO and what's going on in Russia and China?
Okay, first of all, what's happening with NATO? Britain has these Storm Shadows, these other weapon systems that the Ukrainians want to be able to fire into Russia itself. What is stopping it? Well, although the ordnance itself is British, the guidance system is reliant on American technology and American satellite technology. So it is not operational without access to American guidance systems. People don't realize how important companies like Raytheon are internationally, even in other countries' weapon systems. And this is one instance of it. This would similarly apply to a degree to the German arsenal. And even begrudgingly, they wouldn't like to admit it, the French. So the real power controlling these weapons and can they be used against Russia is definitely the Biden administration. On one hand, they were wanting to back Zelensky against Russia. On the other hand, they are not giving everything that would be needed to really bring Putin down for fear of nuclear blackmail or nuclear confrontation. That is at least what they are saying. This is what happens when you have an incompetent president, the senile corruptocrat, a cackling bimbo for a vice president who wants to be president, an incompetent Secretary of Defense, a useless chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and a corrupt deep state. This is the consequence of what you've got. Now, the economic effect on Russia is something else. They can export oil and natural gas to China and to India, but they're not being paid in dollars, euros, or any other currency that people want. And the Chinese and the Indians are not paying them in rupees. The rupee has gone back to the point now where a rupee is worth about a penny, about 1 penny, and sinking. They have to accept payment in, it's ridiculous, not only yuan, which is not an international currency, and not in rupees, which is not an international currency, but they are accepting payment in rice, vegetables, other kind of commodities. They're actually being paid in ingestible commodities because the currency is not something people want. When you begin to have to barter on that level, instead of using your currency, your economy is in trouble. Now, I know Russia has the oil and gas reserves, but it is not refined. It's the cheap stuff, even if it's light crude. Light crude doesn't have to be refined, and China and India have their own refining capacity. Secondly, they're getting paid in rupees or in yuan. They're not getting paid in rubles or in dollars. Now, the ramifications of this are not good. What is happening in the Chinese economy is not good. What is happening in the Russian economy is not good. They are trying to build a brick that is gold-backed to make it an alternative to the dollar. But the South African economy is not good.
No.
These economies are all weak. So how can combining their currencies help them make a reserve currency that will replace the dollar? That is their problem. Their other problem is even more insurmountable, at least for the time being. The Americans control the SWIFT system. They would have to make an alternative to the SWIFT system for international bank transfers. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. But it goes even beyond this. They're all weak. China is in a worse crisis than most people realize. Nobody knows how deep that crisis is. It's not just the real estate bubble, the shadow banking. It is the public debt and the private debt. All these things combined. Then, of course, there's the situation that Putin is facing. Nobody is saying this, but one reason that the United States has an interest in perpetuating the war in the Ukraine is it creates a basis to weaken the ruble by sanctions and embargoes. By weakening the ruble, the Russian ruble, by weakening the Russian ruble, it helps keep the dollar or preserve the dollar as the reserve currency. It hurts BRICS. If Russia were not in this situation in the Ukraine, and they were not spending so much of GDP on defense production, and they were not facing these sanctions and embargoes, the ruble would increase in value. Putin had an ambition of making the ruble an alternative to the dollar, but that didn't happen. His next venture with China and South Africa, and to a degree with Brazil, was BRICS. Now that is not happening. And one of the reasons it's not happening is the war in the Ukraine. It is to the interest of the United States to perpetuate the war in the Ukraine because it creates an impetus for embargoes or sanctions against Russia that keeps the ruble weak. Nobody's going to tell you this too much, but it is a factor in the equation, an indispensable factor in the equation. That is what is happening. However, we need to be careful. The American deficits are astronomical and getting worse. The other, not that everyone else's aren't either, but we're the reserve currency. The second is, if something gets gold-backed, if something can be gold-backed, South Africa and Russia have a lot of gold. If something gets gold back, that gives it a strength. That gives it a strength. It is the weakness of the economies of Russia and China that so far is preventing the BRIC from getting too far. But if they can accumulate sufficient gold reserves in an inflationary environment where the price of gold is high, of the bullion is high, that does present an eventual threat to the dollar.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, the payments from China to Russia, they're having trouble getting paid, even among themselves, because they're up to 6 months to get paid. But what's of concern, I know a lot, is that banks in Hong Kong are trading billions and hundreds of billions of dollars off record, as no governments are able to look at it. So that's a concern too. It's a forerunner of what they're going to do.
Yes. There's the shadow banking that everyone knows about.
Yeah.
But then there's the shadow banking run by the shadow bank.
Yeah, that's right.
Jacob, I want to switch gears to Israel. October 7th, this past Monday, marked the one-year anniversary, 365 days since the Hamas atrocities against the Jewish people. Staggering 1,200 Israelis, including some Americans, were killed, 5,500 injured, 254 were taken hostage, which by all accounts is maybe about 100 who are still alive and still hostage, if they are still alive. And hopefully they'll get them back, but nothing's been done about that. 1 year from now, 1 year ago, this happened. Jacob, where are we at today? I mean, it just seems like what could have been, at that point, you could have gone to Hamas, you could have got rid of Hamas, brought the hostages back, but nothing's been done. The U.S., the EU, Iran, it just becomes a real difficult battle for Israel to get the people back. Now there's a threat of war with Iran, and Netanyahu is being advised by Biden not to retaliate. There's a 55-minute conversation they had this week. Your thoughts on what's going on there a year later? We are still waiting for the hostages to be returned.
The points you highlight are all true. They're quite valid, but it's worse than that. We can crystallize it. I was at the memorial in London for the one-year anniversary on October 7th, a few days ago. I was there, and it was a rally for the hostages still being held. We were there. Large number of Jews, large number of Christian supporters of Israel. The BBC, as in bias, blasphemy, and cowardice, ignored it. The media ignored it. But when Islamofascists demonstrate in London, even in support of terrorist organizations, the media is all over it. So you're not seeing the truth from the mainstream media. That's obvious. But we wouldn't expect to. For the second time, Israel has been attacked from Iran. This time was 181 ballistic missiles that have a 12-hour flight time from Iran to target in Israel, to Tel Aviv. 12 minutes.
12 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. The arrow system and the David sling was fairly successful, but there was some damage. The next thing the media is not telling you is the air base they tried to hit was near Dimona.
Yep.
Israel's nuclear reactor. Iran launched a missile attack on Israel's nuclear capacity. That's what it was. Most of the rockets were directed at Israel's nuclear locations. They did that for a reason. Now, this is the second time ballistic missiles are launched. Biden is telling Israel, don't retaliate, don't hit Iran, don't hit their nukes that are under development. Remember, the Obama, Biden, Harris administration, by removing oil embargoes and the other money given to Iran, $6 billion in ransom by Joe Obama administration. The Joe Obama administration, the diabolical trio of Harris, Biden, and Obama, assisted by Susan Rice and other such people, and Valerie Jarrett and so forth, and Jake Sullivan, they have done everything possible to see a nuclear-armed Iran in effect. Iran would not be on the precipice of developing a nuclear weapon if they don't already have one, had it not been for Barack Obama paying for it. And Joe Biden and Harris paying for it. And now they're saying, Israel, even though they've shot missiles at you, and how long will it be before there's a nuclear warhead on one of those missiles? Don't attack their nuclear facilities. This is the corruption, the evil of the American administration. Much the same as the Bush family and the Bush dynasty and the Bush administration licked the boots of the Saudi Arabians. Joe Obama, the diabolical trio, have licked the boots of the Iranians. What is going on? Barack Obama once was an Freudian slip. He spoke of his Islamic faith. He wanted the Cordova Mosque to be built in New York on the site of September 11th. I'm sorry, of 9/11, which to them would represent conquest. He gave all this money through lifting embargoes to Iran. He allowed widespread Islamic immigration. A terrorist attack took place 15 minutes drive from where you were seated in San Bernardino because the Obama administration did not want to do background checks on the internet, but gave these people visas to come in and kill 14 people in San Bernardino. Barack Obama deliberately snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. After the Petraeus surge, he withdrew from Iraq, and the gap was filled in, the vacuum was filled in immediately by ISIS, who he said was a JV team. 2 weeks later, that JV team were perpetrating one terrorist attack after another in Europe. Then there was the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Whose side in the war and terror is Barack Obama on? Whose side is Harris on? Whose side is Biden on? Something is going on here. Many thinking people would have a difficult time as understanding this as anything less than treason. Now, this is not the first time treason has been perpetrated against the United States by an administration. Richard Nixon did it during the Vietnam War with his détente, when Russia and China were supplying the North Vietnamese with the hardware to kill Americans. He was increasing trade with Russia and China. This kind of treason has happened before. and it's usually economically motivated in some way. But for Israel to be hit the second time, the first time, don't strike back. Now they do it again with ballistic missiles. Don't strike back. Don't attack their nuclear sites, and don't attack Kog Island or their oil export facilities. This is an outrage. Mr. Trump was right. He urged Israel to attack their nuclear sites, and the United States should back them in doing it with bunker-busting ordnance. We have here is not just a betrayal of Israel. We have a betrayal of the national interest of the United States. And there are still people who are so blind and so stupid, they will vote for that party. Again, I believe their blindness is demonically induced. The book of Daniel, chapter 10, speaks plainly about the conflict with Iran that would come at the close of the age with Israel and involve the West, called the Yavan, Europe, Greece. Daniel's prophecies speak of this. We pointed this out many times. But of course, godless people in the White House have no idea what they are dealing with. They do not understand principalities, Rashiot in Hebrew. They don't understand the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece. They have no understanding that what is happening is what Daniel said would happen. They don't know what they're dealing with. They're corrupt. They're godless. They are willing to betray allies. They're willing to betray the interests of their own country, apparently. How? After Israel is attacked the second time, this time with ballistic missiles, can you be pressuring them not to retaliate? This is what we are dealing with. Please pray.
Yeah, absolutely right, Jacob, especially an election coming up. And you just had the anniversary of October 7th. How could you go down that road in pressuring Israel this way when they had, vast amount of numbers of Israelis killed, 2,500 in one, not 2,500, sorry, 1,200 and 5,500 injured. And yet your nuclear facility, it's almost hit. And now you're being restrained from even trying to fight back and try to respond back. So especially in an election year, this is the other side of the coin. What is going to happen if they remain in power? And I don't think they want to give up power.
You're exactly right. Israel would not be as aggressive in its self-defense as it is if it were not an election year.
That's right.
Right now, Biden and Harris are limited in what they can do because of the election. What's going to happen when they don't have those limitations? If, God forbid, that wicked woman is elected.
God forbid, Jacob. Really, God forbid. I mean, my imagination runs wild on that, and I can extrapolate, but I'll leave that for another time. Jacob, I want to finish with the church, some church issues here that we need to address. Ray McCauley went to get his eternal reward. Jerry Saville went to get his eternal rewards. Any thoughts on both of them that passed away this week?
Anybody who's watched video clips of Jerry Saville would know how overtly repulsive that money-grubbing conniver was. The evidence would show that the true God of both of them is Mammon. Ray McCauley was the Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin of Africa, particularly of South Africa. I recall when he left his wife and married another woman who was supposedly a Christian, her husband of his second wife came to Moriel, came to myself and Fred Blomkamp for help. I recall the Rustenburg Declaration of Macaulay. It is unbelievable. He took the story of the Tower of Babel, where God declares, now nothing shall be impossible for them. A divine judgment And he turns it around and says, if we have unity, nothing will be impossible for us. He took something that was bad and turned it around and preached it as if it was something to aspire to. That is how far gone that man was. He'd been a weightlifter and a bouncer before he supposedly became a Christian. I don't know if he did or didn't, but I know he was a heretic. Kenneth Copeland dedicated his church building. He was tied in with Rick Godwin, the anti-Israel preacher, the Dominion is Kingdom Now preacher. He was tied in with all kinds of other people. But when he left his wife and he got divorced, at least some, and remarried with no biblical grounds, at least some people stopped supporting him, but he filled it in with mainly black people. A lot of wealthy blacks from the ANC were drawn to his church, and a lot of poor ones. What else can we say about him? I remember the video clip of him standing at the foot of Table Mountain in Cape Town with witch doctors, Sangomas, with Buddhist monks, with Muslim imams, you name it. And they were standing at the foot of Table Mountain praying together in unison. This was Ray McCauley. I'm not saying I'm glad he's dead, but I'm certainly glad he's gone. And I would say the same about Jerry Saville. Now they're gone, and they didn't take their money with them.
No, they did not. And they're standing before the judgment seat of the Lord to be really addressed on this issue. And what did you say, Jake? I hope they have a good flashlight. And but the prophets galore that are claiming all kinds of things. And Jacob, they're coming out of the woodworks. I mean, two of them, false teachers, pass on, but yet more rise up. It's like a whack-a-mole game. And these prophets are claiming all kinds of stuff, like the hurricane, like this prophetess Jerry. What was her name? I think I had her name here. I've had her name. Well, definitely Rodney Howard Brown, Weaver. Yeah, prophetess Weaver, Jenny Weaver, claiming all kinds of stuff, that they stopped the hurricane and they're controlling the weather too, like Kenneth Copeland. You talked about earlier. This is where
I do not deny that the prayers of many sincere Christians caused divine intervention. But I don't.
It wasn't them.
But it wasn't them. It wasn't. Let's just look at what's happening in the church. When you have somebody who was a theological madman, Todd White with the Rastafarian type dreadlocks, only as a white guy, saying that Jesus Christ on the cross, when he became sin, it doesn't mean that he took the blame for our sin, as the scripture teaches. He became on the cross a pedophile. He became somebody who practiced bestiality, sex with animals. He became a terrorist murderer. He actually became those things, even though he never did them. He became those things. This is blasphemous. This is beyond sick. Yet Michael Brown, the fireman, the false prophet from Jerusalem with the second Pentecost, the apologist for the counterfeit revival in Pensacola, the dear friend of Bill Johnson and what happened in Redding, California with the New Apostolic Reformation, the same Michael Brown, fire, fire, fire. Now he's with Todd White.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, Jacob, people don't know. Just recently, Michael Brown, I think a couple of days ago, had Todd White on his show, his podcast, and you can watch it on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing. And I was going to tell you, Jacob, is that these prophets are coming out of the woodwork claiming some kind of stuff. I wanted to address the Todd White issue, but before you get to his heresies and stuff like that, listen to what they were talking about. They brought him on just to give his testimony, which is some sort of whitewash, or I guess in this case would be Michael Brown wash, all the stuff that he had done, Todd White. and to talk about the phenomenon of one leg shorter than the other, how he healed these things. And it wasn't to question him and say, what a charlatan you are, because it's been proven that he's a charlatan, but to say that, oh, he does it like this and he prays for people and it's what a chiropractor does. Jacob, you have addressed this issue before of one leg shorter than the other and the healing that they do. Can you mention that real quick about?
Yeah, there was a born-again Christian orthopedic surgeon from Australia who said that this condition, when it's congenital, when someone's born that way, is extremely rare. It sometimes can happen as a result of trauma, a severed femur in an accident, but it's a very rare condition. He said it's difficult to diagnose. It can be diagnosed with lasers, the measure the difference with lasers, but it's difficult to diagnose. And he said most medical doctors never see it. Most orthopedic specialists, orthopedic surgeons, only see it a few times in the entire course of their career. Orthopedic specialists only see it a few times in their working lives. Most physicians never see it. These con artists have it at every meeting. Pull my leg, pull the other one. But what do you expect from Michael Brown? He'll promote anything.
Well, instead of addressing the issue and calling him a charlatan and say, hey, mate, can you explain this? Because you seem like to be doing it a lot and on your videos. And I remember Todd White went to Jerusalem and he had this, he healed an Arab. And, I think it was on either the Holy Ghost movie or one of the, I can't remember the name of it. It was definitely not Hillsong, but it was Bethel. It was Bethel. Which one of the movies? And they made a couple of movies about that. And he's in Jerusalem and he heals this Arab guy. And my friend had gone there. And this Arab guy, instead of preaching the gospel to this Arab Muslim, Todd White just does some kind of fake miracle about his back and all that, and he felt better. So the guy does a favor to him. And it's interesting that the Arab, supposedly Muslim, is trying to help Todd White, and he asked him to take him to the Dome of the Rock area, where there's not a lot of Christians that go there, but he takes him in there, and then he tells him, "You can't tell anybody because my family would definitely be under threat." Well, he does this, and then when they asked Todd White to take that footage of the film, this says, "Well, you're going to have to sue us in the United States because we're not going to take the footage off of that." So he was a charlatan from the beginning. He's still a charlatan. That's true story. But look at what Brown doesn't do. Michael Brown just says, look, I was just like you. I was in a revival one time. And he actually finally admitted that he was at Brownsville. Jacob, he talks out of two sides of his mouth. On one side, he says, I never heard of it. I wasn't there. Next thing he says, oh, I was there. I called it and people told me that I have predicted it or prophesied about it. You know pretty well. What was that like?
I ever talked to him by telephone.
Yeah.
And he's as phony as the $3 bill. What makes Michael Brown so treacherous is he's an educated person who actually knows better.
Patricia King made Todd White pretty famous. And actually, she's the one that helped launch his career, supposedly conversion to Christianity and all that stuff from atheism. And he was in drug and alcohol by his own admission. But Jake, I'm going to go through some of the false things and you brought up one of them. He who knew no sin became sin for us. He says Jesus became all those vile things that are listed in Romans 1 at that point on that cross. Jacob, could you explain that verse does say he became sin for us, but it doesn't mean he became a child molester or a Taliban member.
Not a sinner. He became sin, but not a sinner. He took our sin and took the blame for what we did, but he was not a sinner. To say that he was a pedophile on the cross, to say that he was a practitioner of bestiality and someone who has sex with animals, that Jesus Christ became somebody who has sex with animals and molests children, that Jesus Christ became a terrorist and a murderer on the cross.
Yeah, he said he was a hater of God.
Saying he became a sinner. Yeah. He became sin.
Yeah, he definitely has a wrong Christology. He speaks of Jesus as actually not being divine while on the earth because he says kenosis, And he says it. He says, you don't understand kenosis. He says, kenosis really means that Jesus stopped being divine while on the earth. He was God, and he came to the earth and stopped being divine. Jacob, can you explain the kenosis?
This comes from Philippians. The best way I can explain kenosis to people without going into the Greek and so forth, we have a teaching on Philippians on our website where I go into kenosis at some length, and I explain it from the Greek and so forth. If you've ever read the book by Mark Twain or seen the Walt Disney film version of it, The Prince and the Pauper, it was a docufiction about Edward VI, the son of Henry VIII. And he found a boy who looked like him, and he persuaded this street kid, this urchin, to pretend to be the prince inside Hampton Palace, not far from, anyway, from us, but anyway. And he goes out and he becomes a street kid. And he lives among the poor in the slums of London. And this is Edward VI, and he's the prince, and he's heir to the throne. And although he was the prince, he did not have the power or privilege of a prince. He willfully laid it down to go identify with the common people. That's the Prince and the Pauper. Ultimately, he's restored to his position in Hampton Palace. Somebody finds out who he was. A captain of the King's Guard finds out that he is the prince and he is the king. It's a wonderful book, and it's a wonderful children's movie as well. When Disney was still decent and family oriented, but in the days of Walt Disney. But that is kenosis. Jesus never stopped being God. He never abandoned his deity. He abandoned the power and privilege of his deity to identify with us, but he never stopped being what he was. He was fully human and fully divine, not 50-50. Hercules, the son of Zeus, was half human and half divine. Hercules was 50-50 in Greek mythology. Jesus was not a myth, and he was not 50-50. He was 100% God and 100% man, fully human and fully divine. Todd White doesn't know what he's talking about. But you know what? Michael Brown understands that. Michael Brown knows it, but it doesn't stop him from promoting heresy. This is Michael Brown, a backslider with no integrity.
Yeah, Todd White says he's part of the new breed. So he claims to be a sinless new breed. There's another doctrine of the Latter-day Movement, Latter Rain. He says Christians should practice psychic readings, just like the world, because that would give them credibility to tell them about God. He quotes William Branham as something that he should emulate, or we should emulate. He wants Catholic and Christians together, the Catholic Church and the Christian Church to come together. He claims that his 100% clear that Benny Hinn and Copeland are his biggest influencers in his life. He actually repented in 2020. He said that he wasn't preaching the full gospel throughout this time. He was saved in 2004. But then he went back to the normal thing. And this is part of the worst. It's the fact that the he who knew no sin teaching is really bad. But this one's really bad too. He says, God, when you watch pornography, he says, God is watching it through you. And when you don't have intimacy with God, then God waits for you to climax when you're watching pornography, so you can climax over God. That's what God.
Somebody watching pornography on the internet and masturbating, and God's watching it with you. God's looking upon sin. That's what he's saying. And then when you ejaculate, that's God. Oh my Lord!
Yes,
this is so thick and perfect. And Michael Brown promotes him.
Yeah, it's like he wants the Catholic Church and the Christian Church together. But you brought up last week, we're going to address it now, is the fact that the Catholic Archdioceses are going through, again, another surge of legal cases.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, because he teaches sexual perversion and the Catholic Church is sexually perverted. The Diocese of Long Island, which is a relatively small diocese of about 1.5 million people, Catholics in Long Island, they're going bankrupt. Over about 530 cases that they've had to pay out on. No priests go to jail. They're settling out of court for millions and millions. They're bankrupt. But now the Archdiocese of New York under Cardinal Dolan, this is Manhattan, St. Patrick's Cathedral.
No, I was going to say St. Patrick's.
The premier Roman Catholic Church of the United States, even more so than the National Shrine in Washington. The premier Roman Catholic Church in the United States, at least certainly the most famous, St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue across the street from Rockefeller Center. I know it well as a New Yorker. There it is. They are suing their insurance company, Chubb, because Chubb does not want to pay the damages on an additional 1,400 plus litigations against the Archdiocese for pedophilia perpetrated by Roman Catholic clergy against children. On top of the 500 plus the church has already had to pay out on. There's another 1,400 pending, and that's just in Manhattan.
1,400 cases in Manhattan still pending?
Pending, on top of the 500 plus that they've settled already.
Oh. And then what about
the very fact that you have to buy insurance to protect a church from being for pedophilia, that in itself, no wonder Father White likes the Catholic Church. They're two of a kind. Remember, this whole thing now, when this Pope said, you can bless same-sex relationships, the Roman Catholic Church has always had that. I remember at Catholics for Christ, ex-Catholics for Christ conference, you talk to nuns, they'll tell you. You talk to the gender pronouns. They've always had that. A nun who was a lesbian, a butch or a dyke, a masculinized lesbian, she would take the name like Sister Michael Patrick. A girly lesbian nun would take the name like Sister Mary Rose. And if they swung both ways, you know, if they were bisexual lesbian, they would take the name of, you know, Sister Dorothy Thomas or something like that. It went by the names. They had their own version of the gender pronoun. This has always gone on in the Catholic Church. It has always been sexually perverted. Always. These nuns would get their head shaved to look like men and things like this, being in that environment, and get access to the kids. Priests, the same. They're getting dressed up in these vestments, the amos, the alb, the sphincter, the stole, the chasuble, and the maniple, like womanly type clothes, copied from the pagan world, and in an all-male environment and access to kids in Catholic countries like Latin America or Ireland. This is the way homosexuals and lesbians found expression before they were able to come out of the closet. Now that they've come out of the closet, there's less people becoming priests and nuns because they don't have to do that anymore to find a sexual expression for their perversion. Now, this is reality. That's why there's a decline in religious vocations in large part. But it goes beyond this. The amounts of money just in Los Angeles with Cardinal Mahoney.
Yeah.
$730 million in lawsuits plus law fees. $1 billion in Los Angeles. I don't know what to keep Mahoney out of jail. Cardinal McKendrick in Washington, he's another one. Cardinal Law in Boston, he's another one. It goes on and on and on.
I think there was 135 million here in San Diego, not too far from here.
Yeah, that's correct. Houston, the same, 120. I think it was Houston, 120 million. What is interesting is, well, not interesting, about 80% of the admitted cases of pedophilia by priests, I'm not talking about the ones by nuns, by priests, 80% are of a homosexual nature.
Wow.
80%, 20% was against little girls. In Ireland, the culture of nuns was even worse. In Tuam in Ireland, one convent, they found 800 skeletons of dead babies buried in back of the convent. In the Ryan report of the Irish government, not Northern Ireland, not Protestant England, this is Ireland Irish. The Gardaí, the Irish police, think there could be 10,000 skeletons of dead babies buried under or next to convents in Ireland. This is this is evil. No wonder the Catholic Church is against abortion. We don't believe in the murder of the unborn. Let them be born, then we'll murder them. That's what it comes to. We don't believe in an abortion. We don't believe in the murder of the unborn. Let them be born, then we'll murder them. No wonder people like Todd White want to unite with Rome. We're two of a kind.
Yeah, this is sick. This is perverted. And people should watch that movie Spotlight. And again, in 2016, they won 2 Academy Awards for what happened in Boston. And The Magdalene Sisters, I think it's a 2002
yes.
Movie that I think depicts a lot of what Jacob's talking about if you want more information on that. Jacob, thank you so much. We addressed quite a bit of issues. We got questions on backstage. And we got lots of questions and lots of topics, but what a shame. Michael Brown, which a lot of people in the Messianic movement look to him as some kind of a scholar, kind of the way the liberal churches look at N.T. Wright. He's kind of like the charismatic Messianic guru, I guess you could call it that way. And but he knows a lot about this stuff. He knows the truth, but he fails to uphold it and fails to live it. Unfortunately, he promotes, false teachers. Then he says there's no revival in Brownsville. Then he says he was there. I don't know what to believe him sometimes.
He wrote the book, Let No One Deceive You. He was the apologist for Brownsville the way Guy Chevreau was the apologist for Toronto.
Yeah.
I actually interviewed him down in Brownsville, one-on-one, when I was there, Marco.
You still have that? That would be a really good.
I had those on the micro DVR stuff. I don't know what happened to them, moving and everything. But
that's to me.
He was slippery, man. He was slippery. But I told him though that this would end badly, and he denied that. He denied also that that the vans were that the Brownsville was taking people to Toronto to bring it back. And then also, and I laid out the case. I said, they brought it back. Stephen Hill was doing carpet time and then came over and brought it on Father's Day, and it all came together. He goes, no, they were worrying, it originated here. I said, no. I said it is going to end badly. And if you remember, there was Kilpatrick, the pastor, became a false prophet, and he a self-admitted false prophet. Also, there was a big scandal with the IRS and the money, and then Michael Brown took his school of the prophets and had to leave because the Assembly of God didn't want him anymore.
Oh, man.
Anthony, but absolutely, the Toronto deception came via Holy Trinity Brompton in London with Steve Hill and these people, and via Holy Trinity Brompton, London, arrived in Pensacola, Brownsville Assemblies of God.
Well, also from Toronto, Jacob, they were sending van loads of people before Stephen Hill came there. They were already bringing it, and then it just all came together when Stephen Hill came in. It was boom that day. So as a 5 fell.
Yeah, and he denies it. Sometimes maybe on a matter of good conscience, he says, well, I was there and I called for it and it happened, just like we watched the video. So if people interested in watching that video with Todd White, they should watch it. It's if they can stomach it.
There's a bunch of films out there. Google Dr. Michael Brown, fire, Brownsville, and you can see him going, fire, touching people and they're falling back and everything. But
Yeah.
I just don't get why people they respect him for his scholarship because he got a PhD, but it seems like his PhD is made him incompetent. But remember he talked about in that interview, he said, "Oh, I tried to be a Calvinist and everything. I forgot about my Pentecostal roots, and then I ran into Raven." Raven Hill. And then I got back into it in the late 80s before all this happened, which 93, 92, 93. But about that time, they had the St. Louis, some said it thunder, the false prophet, the giants that were false prophets. I think.
Prophets, yes.
Yeah, those guys. And then that St. Louis went and that showed up there with the vineyard there movement, and then that, and then there was the prayer of Jabez. That showed up at some guy's thing when God broke his altar in half, and people said, "Oh, a miracle," So anyway, see you, Marco. Marco had to go. Jay's in charge.
Go ahead to go. We're going to go ahead and go to backstage. We have a ton of questions today for the panel. We will only probably get to half because there's just too many. So all the ones last week that we didn't get to, we will get to this week. But we want to thank you for sticking with us. Everyone that is watching, both on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. Obviously, we will be cutting off the feeds to both Facebook and YouTube because we can't answer your questions. We can't answer them truthfully because YouTube would censor us if we did. So if you can, we're going to put the link to the chat, to the Rumble feed in the chats. So please join us there in a few minutes. Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan, to India to Africa, and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.